In 2009, over 3,000 workers were laid off from South Korean auto company Ssangyong Motor. The labor union staged a 77-day-long sit-in strike to protest the mass layoff, but its desperate outcry was brutally crushed by police SWAT teams. As part of an agreement to end the strike, management agreed to reinstate roughly half of the workers within a year. But till this day, not a single worker has returned to work. Traumatized by police brutality and devastated by economic hardships, 23 workers and family members have died since, 12 of them committing suicide. The unresolved tragedy of Ssangyong Motor all began with the mass layoff. According to the Korean labor law, companies can only carry out layoffs when facing serious business exigencies. This is to guarantee job security for workers in a country like Korea, which has one of the weakest social safety nets among developed countries. The courts ruled that the mass layoff was legitimate, on grounds that the company went bankrupt from a severe liquidity crisis and was insolvent due to high debt ratio. However, recent findings reveal that the reasons for the mass layoff were all cleverly fabricated. It all begins with the Chinese auto company Shanghai Automotive Industry Corporation, SAIC. In 2004, Ssangyong Motor's net worth was $1.2 billion. However, Shanghai Automotive was able to buy Ssangyong Motor at a fraction of the actual amount. As a condition for takeover, Shanghai Automotive promised to invest $1 billion in Ssangyong Motor. Over the years, similar promises of investment were further made, but none were actually kept. The sole objective of Shanghai Automotive was to steal Ssangyong's technology. At Ssangyong, the total cost to develop a new car is estimated to be $300 million. Shanghai Automotive, however, bought Ssangyong's latest technology at a bargain price. Moreover, Shanghai Automotive built an integrated computer network that connects the headquarters in China with Ssangyong's intranet, enabling them to easily copy valuable engineering designs. Shanghai Automotive also took 50 core engineers with them to China. They even took the diesel hybrid technology that was developed with funds provided by the Korean government. In 2008, concluding that it had nothing more to take from Ssangyong Motor, SAIC prepared to leave Korea. As the global financial crisis hit in 2008, Shanghai Automotive voluntarily filed Ssangyong bankrupt, an action which is abnormal for a major shareholder. It claimed that Ssangyong Motor had a debt of $93 million to pay, but only had $7 million in cash. However, this was just half of the story. It turns out that Shanghai Automotive owed Ssangyong about $86 million. Also, Shanghai Automotive was entitled to a loan of over $200 million from the Bank of China and the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China. The Korea Development Bank had even promised to allow an additional loan if Shanghai Automotive first got its loans from the two Chinese banks. In short, if Shanghai Automotive had wanted to, they not only could have paid Ssangyong Motor's debt, but also could have continued to operate Ssangyong Motor. Shanghai Automotive clearly wanted Ssangyong Motor to go bankrupt. In fact, according to a diplomatic document recently made public, lack of liquidity was not the reason for Shanghai Automotive's evacuation. A Chinese official revealed that the reason for the evacuation was because the Korean prosecution was carrying out an investigation regarding the technology leak. Shanghai Automotive, however, knew that their pulling out after taking Ssangyong's technology would be widely condemned and therefore needed a more convincing pretext for the evacuation. This is when they started to come up with ways to convert Ssangyong Motor into an insolvent enterprise. With the cooking of the books, Ssangyong Motor became an insolvent enterprise with a huge debt ratio and net loss. How is this magical twist of numbers possible? Shanghai Automotive, in collusion with the accounting firm Deloitte Anjin, suddenly decreased Ssangyong Motor's tangible asset value by the end of 2008. A company's tangible assets are made up of land, buildings, infrastructure, and machinery. What was previously valued at $1.3 billion was suddenly slashed to $860 million in the books. This was done because a decrease in tangible asset leads to an exponential increase in debt ratio and net loss. Here's what happened. The actual debt Ssangyong retained didn't increase, but due to a sharp decrease in asset value, the debt ratio skyrocketed. And with the asset decreasing by over 500 million instantaneously, the net loss ballooned as well. However, if we refer to data from the Korean Appraisal Board, Ssangyong Motor's tangible asset value was estimated to be around $1.7 billion. This is roughly twice the amount that Deloitte Anjin estimated. Therefore, if we use the data from the Korean Appraisal Board, Ssangyong Motor's 2008 debt ratio isn't 561%, but instead 150%. And the net loss isn't 700 million, but instead less than 200 million. Compared with the debt ratios of other Korean auto companies, you can see that this is actually a rather good result. In compliance with a court order that demanded the evaluation of company assets, the Korean Appraisal Board announced this critical report on March 10th. However, Ssangyong management and Deloitte Anjin conveniently ignored this data, and instead, on March 27th, approved the fabricated financial statement. With the cooking of the books, the formerly intact Ssangyong Motor became an insolvent enterprise under bankruptcy, opening the door to mass layoffs. And as a result, Shanghai Automotive could successfully return to China without being accused of wrongfully bailing out. After Ssangyong Motor came under legal management on February 6, 2009, the fate of Ssangyong fell into the hands of the Korean government. If the bankruptcy court and the Korea Development Bank, the main creditor, had acknowledged Shanghai Automotive's fraudulent management and tried to correct the accounting fraud, the mass layoff could have been avoided. However, instead of trying to set things right, the court and Korea Development Bank turned a blind eye to the fabricated data, effectively approving the mass layoff. Another accounting firm, Ssangyong KPMG, used the fabricated financial statement to claim that the company was insolvent, and reported that the layoff of 2,646 people was necessary. Ssangyong management then used this report as grounds to carry out the mass layoff. Meanwhile, the labor union came up with a self-sacrificing compromise to avoid the layoff. The workers proposed to raise $100 million as emergency funds with their pension as collateral. They also suggested reducing their work hours and pay by approximately 50% to share their jobs. These efforts were, however, completely ignored. Instead, the company ruthlessly suppressed the 77-day-long sit-in strike with private security forces and riot police. Why then was the Lee Myung-bak administration so obsessed with carrying out the mass layoff? The Korean government and the Korea Development Bank turned a blind eye to the illegal technology leak by Shanghai Automotive. The government was afraid that its relations with China might go sour if it continued with the investigation. And as public criticism grew, they tried to cover up their misconduct at all cost. To divert the public's attention, they used Ssangyong Motor workers as their scapegoat. The administration accused the workers for turning Ssangyong Motor into an insolvent company. Even before Sangyong's layoff plan was announced, President Lee publicly commented in favor of a mass layoff.
Workers should be sympathetic and understanding towards management. They should understand that management had no other choice than to fire their workers. Anyone who opposes such a decision is not a true team player.
Ssangyong management took this statement as a signal and used the president's words to justify the mass layoff. The government must have judged that it would be much easier to resell Ssangyong after cutting 40% of the workforce and oppressing the trusted labor union. In 2011, the Lee Myung-bak administration eventually sold Ssangyong Motor, also at a giveaway price, to the Indian conglomerate Mahindra. Looking back, it's easy to see who profited from these events. Shanghai Automotive got away with the technology it wanted, and the Korean government and Korea Development Bank were able to easily resell Ssangyong Motor to Mahindra. Mahindra not only gained access to advanced SUV technology like Shanghai Automotive, but also was able to take over a factory with complacent workers. To this day, the accounting firms continue to benefit from Ssangyong Motor. Samjong KPMG, who prescribed the mass layoff, profited as Ssangyong Motor's reselling supervisor. And Deloitte Anjin still works as Sangyong's financial auditor under its new owner, Mahindra. The person responsible for the suppression of workers was promoted to chief of the National Police Agency, and the president of the bankruptcy court became a Supreme Court justice. And the Lee Myung-bak administration was able to set an example that showed that any resistance against layoffs would be relentlessly crushed. While everybody was feeding their own greed, workers were brutally suppressed and lost their livelihood. Now, we are left with no choice but to demand that the Korean government and Mahindra recognize that the mass layoffs were groundless and that they reinstate the workers. We call upon workers and citizens of the world to help spread this video and be the voice of the helpless victims in this inexcusable tragedy, in order to stop the increasing death toll and bring justice once and for all.